Some phone calls rearrange your entire life before you've even sat up in bed. The ring itself is different, sharper, more insistent, like the sound knows what it's carrying and has decided you need to wake up fast. My name is John Clifford. I am 68 years old. I live in a 3-bedroom house on East 49th Street in the Ardsley Park neighborhood of Savannah, Georgia. A quiet, tree-lined stretch of brick sidewalks and live oaks that my wife Ellen and I bought in 1988 when I joined the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Georgia. I raised my daughter Paige in that house. I buried Ellen from that house in March of 2019. And on the night of Friday, October 3, 2025, I was asleep in that house when my phone rang at 3:04 a.m. I picked up on the second ring. Old habit. 30 years of being reachable at all hours, emergency calls, duty attorneys, witnesses who remembered things at inconvenient times, leaves a man with a very light trigger. I was awake before I was conscious. Paige. I recognized the breathing before she spoke. The particular rhythm of someone trying to stay quiet while their chest is heaving. Dad. Her voice was barely above a whisper, not sleepy quiet, hiding quiet, the kind of quiet you practice. Dad, please come get me. 5 words. The first 4 I had heard before, years ago, when she was 9 years old and had fallen off her bicycle 3 blocks from the house and couldn't walk home. She had said it the same way then. Small, certain that I would come. Not panicked, but in pain. The please had been conversational then. The please at 3:04 on October 3, 2025 was something entirely different. There was a break in the middle of it, a fracture, a barely controlled edge that told me she was holding herself together by an act of pure will. Where are you? Home. I mean, Philip's house. Please, Dad. Then a sound I will carry for the rest of my life. A sharp crack, not a slap, more like a hand flat against a hard surface, very close to the phone. And a voice in the background. Low, controlled, the particular vocal register of a man who has learned to be threatening without changing his volume. The voice of someone who has had a great deal of practice at it. Who is that? The line went dead. I was already out of bed. I was already reaching for my pants on the chair. I was already running the calculation in my head. Habersham Street, 10 minutes. What I might need, what I could not afford to do wrong, before the phone had stopped vibrating in my hand. I want to tell you about Paige before I tell you what happened next, because a father doesn't get to just skip to the part where he drives across town. You need to understand who I was walking toward that night. Paige Ellen Clifford was born in September 1991 at Memorial Health University Medical Center, 3 blocks from the Savannah River. She was Ellen's daughter in every way that mattered. The same dark eyes, the same instinct to find the humor in a hard moment, the same stubborn refusal to accept an incomplete answer. She grew up in the Ardsley Park house watching me prepare federal cases at the kitchen table, and by the time she was 16, she could identify prosecutorial overreach in a courtroom drama faster than most law students. She went to the University of Georgia, came home to Savannah, became a licensed occupational therapist at Candler Hospital on Reynolds Street. She was good at it, the kind of therapist who remembered every patient's dog's name and brought books to people who mentioned in passing that they liked reading. She met Philip Hale in the spring of 2020 at a restaurant on River Street during the kind of accidental introduction that feels meaningful when it happens and makes you wonder, much later, what you should have noticed. Philip was 35, a residential and commercial real estate developer with an office on Bull Street in the historic district. He dressed well. He spoke precisely. He had the right charitable affiliations, the Savannah Music Festival, the Telfair Museums, the kind of organizations that told you a man knew where he wanted to be seen. He knew how to talk to a retired federal prosecutor deferentially, without crossing into obsequiousness, asking intelligent questions about the law that suggested he had done some reading before the conversation. He had done his homework. I found that admirable. I told Ellen about him, and Ellen, who had an instinct for reading people that mine couldn't match, had listened carefully and said, "Give it time." Not yes, not no. Give it time. I wish I had asked her what she meant by that. I liked him. That sentence, typed out now, feels like the most expensive 4 words I have ever written. They married in June 2021 at the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist on Abercorn Street, a magnificent old building with oak-paneled ceilings and light that came through the stained glass in colors that Ellen would have loved. Ellen had been gone 2 years by then, and Paige had chosen the cathedral partly because it was where Ellen had attended Christmas services every year for 23 years. Owen was born in January 2023, a healthy, cheerful baby who had Paige's dark eyes and a temperament that reminded me of Ellen's steady patience. By the fall of 2024, I had noticed things. Not large things, small ones. The way Paige always checked her phone before she answered a question I'd asked her. The way she canceled dinner plans with a different excuse each time. But always the same apologetic tone. The way Philip spoke for her in restaurant conversations in a manner that looked like attentiveness but felt like something else. The way Owen, at 2 years old, went silent when Philip raised his voice about anything. Not afraid exactly, but watchful. The way a child becomes watchful when watchfulness has become necessary. I had spent 30 years reading people across deposition tables and in interrogation rooms, cooperating witnesses, hostile witnesses, people lying while crying, and people telling the truth while laughing. I knew the difference between a woman who was busy and a woman who was managed. The behavioral signature is not the same. Nothing was said, because Paige had not said anything. And because I had learned early in my career that pressing a witness before they're ready produces recantation, not truth. The instinct to push, to ask directly, to force the issue is almost always counterproductive. The right move is patience. You create the conditions in which the person can come to you. You don't go after them. I waited. I watched. I kept my Sundays free in case she wanted to bring Owen by, which she sometimes did and sometimes didn't, and I never made her feel the difference. A father who makes his daughter feel guilty for not visiting creates distance. A father who is simply there, reliably and without pressure, becomes the person she calls at 3:04 in the morning. I told my friend Dennis Keel we'd been at the U.S. Attorney's Office together for 12 years before he went to private practice, his firm now on Drayton Street downtown. I told Dennis in July 2025, over coffee at a cafe on Broughton Street, that I was worried about my son-in-law. Worried how? Dennis asked. Controlled environment. Isolation, financial dependence. Paige stopped working at Candler 8 months ago, supposedly to spend more time with Owen. She hasn't mentioned going back. Dennis set down his cup. Has she spoken to you directly about it? No. Which is information in itself. Dennis looked at me for a moment. You want me to quietly pull his business filings? I want to know if there's anything open on him. Dennis nodded. He knew what I was asking, and he knew why I was being careful about how I asked it. A father using his professional network to investigate his son-in-law without his daughter's knowledge is walking a line between protection and interference. I was aware of that line. I was walking it deliberately. I didn't know it yet, but Dennis was going to find something that had nothing to do with Paige and everything to do with why Philip Hale was so careful about controlling who came into his house. Dennis called me 6 days later. What he found, I'll tell you about shortly. But on the night of October 3rd, 2025, at 3:04 in the morning, none of that mattered yet. What mattered was that my daughter's voice had gone quiet in the middle of the word please, and I was backing my car out of the driveway on East 49th Street before the phone had finished cooling in my hand. Philip and Paige's house was on Habersham Street, in the Midtown neighborhood of Savannah, a 10-minute drive from Ardsley Park at 3 in the morning. When the streets were empty and the moss-draped oaks formed a canopy over the road that in daylight looked picturesque and at 3 a.m. looked like a tunnel with no visible end. I drove the speed limit, a deliberate decision made in the first 30 seconds. I needed to be present and functional when I arrived. Urgency that overrides judgment is not urgency. It is panic, dressed up as action. I had seen what panic looks like in situations that required precision, and I had never once watched it improve an outcome. I drove the speed limit, and I spent 9 minutes thinking through what I knew and what I didn't know, and what I would do with each possible version of what I found at that house. Habersham Street at 3:40 in the morning is completely quiet. Broad, tree-lined, the oaks arching overhead with Spanish moss, the historic homes behind iron fences. A street that looks like nothing urgent has ever happened on it. That is the thing about these houses. They are very good at looking like nothing is wrong inside them. Philip and Paige's house was a 2-story craftsman renovation on a double lot. I had always attributed the extensive renovation to professional competence. Standing in front of it at 3:43 a.m., I understood it differently. A man who rebuilds a structure to his own specifications controls every room. He built himself a space on his own terms. The front porch light was on. Master bedroom window showed a faint light behind closed curtains. Someone awake with the lights low. I walked to the door and knocked. Evenly, the door opened after 40 seconds. Philip stood in the frame. He was dressed, which meant he hadn't been asleep, in dark jeans and a collared shirt. His expression was the expression of a man who had been expecting this knock and had spent 40 seconds deciding which version of himself to present. He chose composed. John. The word carried a tone that wanted to sound welcoming and landed somewhere closer to territorial. It's 3 in the morning. Where's Paige? She's asleep. She's fine. We had an argument and she got upset and called you. She does this sometimes. You can check in with her in the morning. She called me, and then the line went dead. I'd like to hear her voice. John, she's sleeping. I'm not going to wake her up because she made an impulsive phone call. If you want, I'll have her call you first thing now. The word was quiet. I'm told that at my most direct my voice drops in volume rather than rising. It's a courtroom habit. Juries pay more attention when you lower your register than when you raise it. Philip's composure shifted. Something tightened in the line of his jaw. She's not leaving, and I'd like you to leave my property. He started to close the door. I put my hand on the frame. Not forcefully, just firmly enough that the door didn't move. I'm going to say one thing, Philip, and I want you to hear it clearly. I looked at him. Not with anger. Anger is imprecise. With attention. Either you let me hear my daughter's voice right now, or I am going to stand on this porch and call Detective Ray Booker of the Savannah Police Department, whom I have known for 16 years, and report that my daughter called me in distress from this address and I am being prevented from confirming her welfare. That call takes 2 minutes. The response takes 10. Your choice. He stared at me. This is absurd. Then let me hear her voice, and I'll drive home. A long pause. The specific pause of a man calculating which option costs him less. He turned from the doorway without a word, leaving the door open in a way that was meant to look like permission and felt like a warning. I stepped inside. The front hallway was dim. The house smelled of dinner, something with garlic, hours old. A child's sneaker was on the floor near the stairs, one of Owen's, a small blue thing with a Velcro strap, and the sight of it sitting alone on the hardwood while the house was dark and silent at 3 in the morning did something to the temperature of my chest that I will not easily describe. Philip was at the foot of the stairs. He called up in a measured voice. Paige, your father's here. A long silence. Then movement above. Footsteps, slow, careful. A light came on at the top of the stairs. Paige appeared at the landing. She was wearing a gray sweatshirt and leggings. Her hair was down. She was holding her left arm against her body in the way you hold something that hurts when it moves. Her face had the particular closed quality of a person who has been crying for a long time and run out of water. Dad. Her voice was steadier than it had been on the phone. Steadier in the way that tells you someone has been coached on steadiness. I'm okay. I'm sorry I called. I was upset. I'm fine now. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at a point 6 inches above my left shoulder. 30 years of reading witnesses. I knew what I was looking at. Come down, sweetheart. She's fine. Philip from beside me. You can see that yourself. Paige. My voice quiet. Come down and talk to me. She hesitated. Then she came down the stairs, one hand on the rail. When she reached the bottom and turned toward the kitchen light, I saw her left forearm clearly for the first time. A bruise. A fresh one. The particular purple red of something that had happened in the last 2 hours, running from the inner wrist to the middle of the forearm. The kind of mark that comes from a grip. I looked at it for exactly 1 second. Then I looked at Philip. He was watching me with the expression of a man who has decided that what I see does not matter because I cannot prove what made it. Paige. My eyes stayed on Philip. Get your coat in Owen's bag. She's not going anywhere, Philip said, same words as at the door. He had decided this was his position, and he was staying on it. She's my wife, and this is our home, and you have no authority here. He was right about the authority. He had no idea what I had instead. I took my phone from my jacket pocket. You're right. I have no legal authority here. But I'm going to make a phone call, and after I make it, you're going to want Paige out of this house before 6 a.m. Because at 6 a.m., a different kind of authority arrives. I stepped out onto the porch. The October night was warm and still, the Savannah River scent carried in the air. The oaks on Habersham were motionless. I stood there for a moment, looking at the quiet street, and then I dialed Dennis Keel. Dennis answered on the third ring. John. It's time. Make the call to Booker, and send me the file you put together on Philip. Tonight, I didn't know it yet, but Dennis had been keeping that file in a folder on his desktop for exactly this kind of night. Back inside, Philip was talking to Paige in a low, tight voice. When he heard me come back through the door, he stopped. Who did you call? An old colleague. I sat down on the bench beside the door, the one with Owen's other sneaker underneath it, and I looked at Philip Hale with 30 years of professional patience and the specific calm of a man who has already made every important decision. I'd make yourself some coffee. It's going to be a long morning. I didn't know it yet, but Philip Hale had been under investigation by the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit out of the Atlanta field office for 7 months. He just didn't know that I knew. If you've been listening for a while and want stories like this to keep coming, it really helps if you hit that like button and subscribe. 97% of people never do, but it's what keeps this whole thing running. So, let me tell you what Dennis had found. 6 days after our coffee on Broughton Street, Dennis had a printed summary on the desk of his Drayton Street office and the expression of a man who found more than he expected. Philip Hale's company, Hale Properties LLC, operating since 2018, had completed 14 renovation projects across Savannah and Chatham County. Clean on the surface. Below it, 3 projects financed through falsified draw schedules, inflated contractor invoices, and cost documents that didn't match the public permit records. The FBI Financial Crimes Unit in Atlanta had been examining the pattern since March 2025. 2 document preservation notices had gone to Hale Properties in June. Philip didn't know Dennis had a contact in the Atlanta U.S. Attorney's Office who had mentioned the open matter as a professional courtesy. He also didn't know I had spent a decade prosecuting financial crimes before moving to public corruption cases. When I came back inside at 3:40, Philip was in the kitchen. Paige was at the table, coat already on, without being asked, which told me everything about what she had decided. Owen was still asleep upstairs. Paige had his bag packed. She had done it quietly, efficiently, in the 15 minutes I had been on the porch. Philip looked at the bag. Then, at me. You can't take my son. Paige is taking Owen. That's not a legal question tonight. That's a mother taking her child to her father's house in the middle of the night. Happens all the time. I'll call my attorney. You should. I set my phone on the kitchen counter, screen up, so he could see Dennis's name in the recent calls. Call him now if you'd like, and while he's on the line, ask him whether he's aware that the FBI Financial Crimes Unit out of Atlanta has been sitting on an open matter related to Hale Properties since March. Ask him about the document preservation notices from June. And then tell him that as of tonight, a Savannah PD wellness check has been requested for this address, and that my daughter is leaving voluntarily with visible injuries on her arm, and ask him how he'd like to document all of that together. The kitchen was completely silent. Philip's hand was resting on the counter. I watched it. He was very still. You're bluffing. Philip. I kept my voice at the same register I'd used since I arrived. I spent 30 years in the U.S. Attorney's Office. I do not bluff. I build cases. I've been building this one since July. He looked at Paige. She was looking at the table. Paige. His voice shifted. the controlled tone cracking at the edge, revealing something underneath it. Tell him. Tell him you're fine. Tell him this is between us. Paige looked up. She looked at Philip for a long moment with the expression of a woman saying goodbye to something she had spent years trying to make work. I'm going to my dad's. Quietly. She stood up. She picked up Owen's bag. Philip looked at me one more time. I could see him running calculations, the attorney call, the exposure, the wellness check, the document preservation notices. I watched the math reach its conclusion. He stepped back from the counter. I got Owen from his room. He was warm and confused and buried his face in my neck when I carried him down the stairs. He smelled like the baby shampoo Ellen used to buy when Paige was small, and I held him a little tighter than strictly necessary on the way to the front door. We were in my car by 4:15 a.m. Paige sat in the passenger seat with her bag on her lap, and Owen asleep in the back seat in a travel car seat she kept in the hall closet. She had thought to grab it, which meant she had thought about this moment before tonight. Maybe many times. She didn't say anything for the first 5 minutes of the drive. The oaks went by overhead, dark and heavy. Then, how long have you known? Since last spring. I wasn't sure until tonight. The investigation. Is that real? The investigation is real. Dennis will confirm it with you tomorrow. You'll need your own attorney. Someone who handles family law. Dennis knows a good one. She was quiet again. I kept thinking if I just managed it better. If I just gave him less reason. Paige, gently, that's not how it works. You know that. I know. A pause. Mom would have known sooner. Your mother would have had him served with papers before the reception cake was cut. And she would have done it in a way that made him think it was his idea. Paige made a sound that was half laugh and half something else entirely. She reached over and put her hand on my arm. We drove the rest of the way in the particular quiet that exists between two people who have been through enough together to not require words. In the weeks that followed, events moved with the deliberate pace of legal processes conducted correctly. Detective Ray Booker filed the wellness report on October 4th. Paige gave a formal statement at the Savannah PD on Bull Street on October 7th, a detailed account of the previous 14 months, supported by photographs, text messages, and medical records from an urgent care visit in April 2025 that she had documented quietly, on her own. She was more prepared than I had realized. She had been building her own record in private, in the way that people who grew up watching a federal prosecutor work their cases learn to document things before they know exactly why. The family law attorney Dennis recommended, Patricia Gaines, 22 years of Savannah family law experience, the demeanor of someone who had heard everything, filed for an emergency protective order on October 8th. Granted the same day. Philip was required to vacate the Habersham Street house within 48 hours. The FBI Financial Crimes Investigation received a formal referral from Savannah PD on October 10th. Charges were filed in January 2026. I made the call that initiated that referral. What the federal system did with it was its own business. On a Sunday morning in late October 2025, I was sitting on the back porch of the house on East 49th Street, with Owen in my lap and Paige in the other chair, both of them drinking orange juice from the glasses Ellen had bought at a shop on Liberty Street in 2003. The ones with the thin gold rim that I had refused to put in the dishwasher for 22 years. Owen was explaining, with great seriousness, the plot of the book we had read the night before. He was a detailed narrator. He missed nothing. Paige was watching him with the expression I had been waiting to see back on her face, present, not watchful, not managed. Present, Dad. She waited while Owen turned to Paige. Thank you for not coming through the door like a wrecking ball. I thought about it. I know you did. You'd have had to bail me out. She smiled. I would have, but then you'd have owed me. I looked at my daughter in the Savannah morning light, in the house where she grew up, with her son in her lap and the worst of it behind her, and I thought about Ellen, who had been the one to always know when Paige needed to be reached and when she needed to be given space to find her own way out. You called the right plays, sweetheart, I thought. Both of you did. Here is what I want you to carry from this, if you're listening. A father's job is not to remove every obstacle from his child's path. If you do that, you raise someone who cannot navigate. The job is to be present enough to recognize the difference between an obstacle and a trap, and to know, when it is a trap, how to dismantle it without destroying the person you're trying to save in the process. I did not break down a door that night. I stood on a porch and made a phone call. But I had 30 years of preparation behind that phone call, and a daughter who had been quietly preparing herself right alongside me without either of us knowing the other was doing it. That is what a family does when it works. It prepares, it documents, it waits for the right moment. And when the call comes at 3:04 in the morning, it shows up. Owen finished his page and looked up at me. Grandpa. The gravity of a 5-year-old who has something important to communicate. The bear found his way home. He did. Because he knew where it was. That's right. He never forgot. If you liked this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more family-centered accounts like this.